Media resources in our Communications Manager servers include such things as transcoding resources or conferencing resources, media termination point resources. Music on hold is another one. And one troubleshooting issue we have quite a bit, that I've personally run into quite a bit, is it seems that a particular media resource like a conference bridge is not available when I need it to be available. And in this video we want to do a couple of things. We want to review how media resources are allocated using MRGs, media resource groups, and MRGLs, media resource group lists. Then I want to take you out to a Cisco iOS router and review how we can do some troubleshooting of Cisco iOS based media resources. First though, let's take conference bridges as an example. Let's imagine that I've got these three media resource groups, these three MRGs. Let's say that I've got two MRGs that I've created, two media resource groups. I defined MRG_1 and MRG_2. And in MRG_1, I've got CFB1. Conference Bridge 1, it's got a capacity of 2 conference calls. I've also got CFB2, it's got a capacity of 1 conference call. In MRG_2, it just has one resource. It's CFB3, it's got a capacity of 1 conference call. And I also have created a 4th conference bridge. Let's call it CFB-4. It has a capacity of 1 conference call, and I have not assigned that to a media resource group. However, just because I have not assigned it to a media resource group doesn't mean it doesn't belong to a media resource group, because there is a null media resource group that exists by default. When you create a media resource, by default, it goes into the null media resource group, which all of your devices have access to. We don't have to specify the null media resource group as part of a device's media resource group list. It's just available. If you want to move something out of the null media resource group, you just simply place it in a media resource group that you created. Now, the way we assign a media resource to a phone is to create a media resource group list, an MRGL. And on screen, I've got this MRGL_1, and it contains 2 media resource groups. And here the order is important. That's a big takeaway I want you to get. I've got MRG_1 listed first and MRG_2 listed second. This means that if I've got several phones trying to use these conferencing resources, we're going to exhaust the conferencing resources in MRG_1 completely before we move on to MRG_2. However, within a media resource group, we do a round robin. We go back and forth. We try to load share among the resources within a group. So let's go through a few examples to illustrate this. Let's say that I've got 1 conference call. This is my first conference call that we're setting up, conference call number 1. Well, we're going to start at the top of MRG_1, and we're going to allocate one of the 2 available conference bridges. And we're going to set up the first conference call, and this conference bridge can support 2 conference calls, and we're going to allocate one of them right now for conference call number 1. Now, why did we use MRG_1 instead of MRG_2? Because it's listed first in our media resource group list. When the second conference call gets set up, it's going to use CFB2. Why is that? Because within a media resource group, within MRG_1, we're doing a round robin load balancing. We're cycling through all the available resources. So we're doing some load balancing between our 2 conference bridges. What about when the third call comes up? Do we go on to MRG2 now to do load balancing? No, we don't. We continue to stay in MRG_1. We want to completely exhaust that media resource group before we move on to the next media resource group. So the third conference call is going to use CFB1. Now at this point, we have exhausted all of the conference bridge resources in MRG1, which was listed first in our media resource group list. So when we need to set up a 4th conference call, now we do go down to the next media resource group within our MRGL. And that's going to be Conference Bridge 3. But let's say that we need to set up one final conference call number 5. At this point, we have exhausted all of our conference resources in all of the media resource groups that belong to our media resource group list. Can I set this up? Yes, I can, because I have a conferencing resource available in my null media resource group. And because it belongs to the null media resource group, that means that all of my devices have access to it. So if you're having trouble allocating an appropriate media resource, one of the big things we check is how those media resources are being allocated. Now let's go over to a Cisco iOS router and talk about a bit of troubleshooting for a Cisco iOS-based media resource. I'm sitting here on Router HQ, and I've got some of the DSPs, the digital signal processors in this router, configured as a video conferencing bridge. And we're speaking skinny between the Communications Manager server and this router. In fact, I can do a show SCCP, and we can see that I'm configured as a video conferencing resource. I'm currently active. Here are my 2 call agents to which I can point. We see the codecs that I'm going to support. Now let's go over to our Communications Manager, and under Media Resources, let's take a look at our conference bridges. We'll do a find. And we can see that this conference bridge, HQ-vid-CFB, we see that it is registered. However, a very common troubleshooting issue we have with Media Resources is after you add this media resource initially, instead of saying registered, it might say rejected. It seems as if we have some sort of a security violation when we thought we set everything up perfectly. Well, let's not be overly concerned if it says rejected. That is a very common issue, and it's really easy to solve in most cases. Typically, all we have to do is to go back to the router and restart the Skinny process. We can simply go into global configuration mode and say no SCCP to turn it off. We'll wait a few seconds to let the Skinny Client Control Protocol shut down, and then we'll turn it back on again. I'll say SCCP to turn it back on, and it says it is now up. Great. And if we had been facing a rejected state previously, if we refreshed this, it should now be registered. Those are some things to consider as you're troubleshooting media resources.